Happy Monday, folks, and welcome to another action-packed edition of CPAC Live. Welcome back to ACU Chairman Matt Schlapp to retake his position at the CPAC Live anchor desk. How was Iowa, Matt Schlapp?
Anchor desk. It was awesome. It was great to be out there with Matt Whitaker, a hometown boy. I got to meet Matt Whitaker's dad and also his wonderful daughter, Allison, who worked for us.
Our former intern.
As well. That's right, our former intern. And we were joined by Penny Nance, who's really great. Man, she gives a great, rousing stump speech. But more than anything else, it was great to just be amongst people who are really worried about what's going on in the country. And I think they're also worried when they see all these public polls with this kind of mythology that there's no way that Donald Trump can win. He's too far behind. He's behind in a lot of states that he won last time. And when you get on the ground like I did in Nevada, like we did at CPAC, Wisconsin, and we spent a lot of time with Scott Walker coming out of Iowa, you learn a lot about what's going on in a state. And what I learned coming out of Iowa is I really think Joni Ernst is going to get reelected in the state of Iowa, and that I believe Donald Trump will win again in Iowa. It might be a little bit tighter this time, but he's going to win. And the really exciting news is we could pick up a couple of House seats too.
Well, we know that there are a lot of these contemporary issues are affecting folks in Iowa, whether it's reopening of the schools, whether it's marching and rioting through the streets. The good folks of Iowa are not immune to a lot of the bad things that they're watching on their television screens happening across America. I was a little jealous of you getting to be on the road last week, seeing all of those cool pictures of you on the bus. And it gives me great pleasure to say that this week, the CPAC bus is getting back on the road, headed northwest of here on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. And this Saturday, September the 19th, we will be in Washington, Pennsylvania, just south of Pittsburgh. And we want all of you to join us this Saturday for CPAC Pennsylvania. You can go to conservative.org and get your ticket there. On October the 3rd, we'll be in Greensboro, North Carolina. October the 15th, we're going all the way up to Michigan, an important state. October the 22nd, a return trip to Minnesota on the heels of our trip from last year on 9/11 in Ilhan Omar's backyard. And then finally on November 2nd, we'll be in the Sunshine State of Florida. Why is it important for us to go to Pennsylvania at the end of this week, Matt Schlapp?
And I hate to do this to all of you hardworking people on our team, but we might want to wedge in there CPAC Nevada. I know the governor's tried to shut everything down, but I think we have a real chance in Nevada.
Well, the president's going to be out there later today in Nevada.
That's right.
Operating in violation of that governor's order.
And New Hampshire as well. I think that's another state that is really in play this time. There was that kind of strange interaction between Senator Ayotte and the president last time, which is not there this time. And I think a lot of people in the state of New Hampshire are looking at this insanity that's going on in these big cities. And they're saying, this is not the America I know. So it's pretty exciting. This travel schedule's exciting. It's part of our America versus Socialism project. You should go to our website as well and get one of the yard signs or one of the bumper stickers or a whole collection of them and give them to your friends and family. I know I'm doing that very regularly. Jonathan Moy was with me on the road. He must have passed out hundreds of these bumper stickers. People love the idea that it encapsulates what this is really all about in this election. It's not just about electing this man or that man. It's really about saving the country.
It's about the future of this country, what kind of world your kids, my kids, are gonna live in 10 years. We're starting to get a lot of pictures of folks sending in the America versus Socialism yard signs.
Is that happening?
It's happening.
That's
you
great.
Can send them to us on Twitter.
I want to see the T-shirts. We have Impeach Justice Roberts T-shirts, which I think are, that's out there, which I like. And we also have all the dates and towns. Obviously some things will change since it's you got to look at all the data. You got to be looking at where we should go and not go. But the T-shirt's great. You got to go and order it today.
Let me ask you one last question before we kick off today's show. One of the terrible things that we had to watch over the weekend were two LA County sheriffs that an assassination attempt was made on their lives, essentially, and it's all on film. It's very difficult footage. Then the protesters refused to let ambulances into the ER for law enforcement officers to receive medical attention there in LA very promptly. The Joe Biden Twitter account, I don't know if it was Joe Biden or whoever's running the damn campaign, came out with an anti Second Amendment, a gun control message saying we've got to get these weapons of war off the street. You mentioned New Hampshire. We're going to Western Pennsylvania, Michigan, Minnesota. What's a message like that says, well, you know, folks, you're just not going to have a right to defend yourself, and we're going to have to let the criminals keep the guns, and law enforcement, you're not going to be able to do your job in police communities. What's that going to do to the state of the election? And why?
Joe Biden is running on the mask. Joe Biden is running on the virus. Joe Biden is running with the virus. Donald Trump is trying to run against the virus and defeat the virus. Joe Biden and his people believe that their best chance of winning is to instill unnecessary fear into people about the danger, which is a real danger, of Chinese corona. And so what you see when Joe Biden starts talking about other issues, it doesn't seem to make any sense. So they're going out there with their gun control message while they're doing nothing to stop the violence of these Black Lives Matter incorporated mobs that are breaking out all over the country. Doing nothing. He gave one tepid admonishment to kind of a generic form of violence. He didn't call out the group. He didn't call out the names of the people perpetrating the violence. He didn't even mention the names of the cops who have been shot and the other innocent people who have been shot, the blood running in the streets of our largest cities. You know, so when Joe Biden tries to venture away from his central focus, which is Trump's a bad guy, it's so dangerous I can't leave my basement, and if you do see me, I'm going to be wrapped in a mask, and I'm going to tell you that you have a really good chance of getting Chinese corona, which means we got to shut down churches, we got to shut down schools. He talked about maybe having a new economic shutdown, and then he reeled that back. So I just think this is more examples of they actually don't have a message on any other topic. He's really rusty. He hasn't gone out there and sharpened his message at all. I don't know what it is other than Trump can't be trusted. Read all these terrible books that are coming out and fear for your life.
To shut down the economy. And what makes me really angry, and I know you do such a good job that inspires so many people of being a happy warrior. But I see their desire to tank the economy with more shutdowns, to keep the churches and the schools closed. You've got kids in urban areas who are being shot because of the violence that's not getting help from police chiefs and police on the ground there. You've got a lot of politicking around the coronavirus where people are getting sick, where it seems like those people who want to take down this president become okay with a certain amount of misery, injury, and even death in order to get what they want. And it is very upsetting to me.
The saddest thing is the levels of alcoholism and drug abuse, suicide rates, this evidence that young kids are feeling very depressed because they're not out with their friends, and they're being told by some of their parents that it's too dangerous to have play dates and stuff. You know, we can't live like this.
You can't do it.
We can. We just had we just went through 9/11, and which is a meaningful day to all of us. And you can't honor police officers one day and try to destroy them the next, which is what these people are trying to get away with. They're trying to say they actually honor the first responders of 9/11. Joe Biden went to those commemoration ceremonies, but then the very next day they pick up the themes. And in his case, he's silent about the violence. And these are his ground troops. I mean, this is part of the effort to try to get Joe Biden elected. Make no mistake, these are not spontaneous uprisings. These are uprisings paid for by way too many American corporations, funded through Act Blue, which is the same online platform that's funding Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and the rest of them. And they think that we don't see what this is. And after I left the White House, after President Trump's acceptance speech, that was a very organized mob to try to intimidate anybody involved in the Republican Party. That's what they're trying to do to us, folks. They're trying to intimidate us. They're trying to make us feel bad about our country. They're trying to peel off through the Lincoln Project and these other ridiculous organizations. Peel off just enough Republicans, make them feel demotivated about supporting the president or the Republican cause generally, and maybe even make them fear violence. Maybe they just won't go vote. And I can't believe that these are the tactics that the Democratic Party has embraced. But we have to understand this is this new socialist Democratic Party.
They are really pushing the envelope with what I would consider what's decent and what's acceptable on the political spectrum. What do you think we need to do in order to counter that appropriately? I mean, we're decent folks. We're nice folks. We believe in the Constitution and working together. Doesn't that handicap us?
We organize in places like schools and churches. So it's a little hard these days when they're trying to close down the very places where we tend to come together and talk about these important issues. But I think it's one of the reasons why the ACU is getting so much more active. We've got to, it's up to us, folks. We got to take back our country. We have a brave man in Donald Trump who's willing to give us 4 more years, thank God. And we got to do all we can to reelect him. But let's also remember something else. You know, we could pick up a couple of these House seats in Iowa. David Young is running again, for instance, out in Iowa. We just talked to Steve House. We're going to talk to Steve House. And there's a lot of other candidates. Dan Rodheimer, who I met while I was out in Nevada. You know, it doesn't take very many of these, right? 17 of these, 17 out of 31 Republicans running in districts that the president carried in 2016, but the party lost in 2018 because there's a lot of voters, millions of voters, something like 6 and 8 million voters who love Donald Trump, but they're more meh on the Republican Party. And that's one of the exciting things about what Trump, the outsider, has brought to politics is we're really a coalition. There's a lot of people who support the ACU who are they're so on the party, and then we got a lot of people associated with us who are really into the party and have important leadership roles in the party. So it's Trump, it's the Republican Party, and then it's the conservative movement. And of all of that, the conservative movement, we have to always remind ourselves there are more conservatives in this country than any other subgroup, and we ought to be more confident in the fact that there's a lot of us, so don't get discouraged. We can win this thing.
I'm looking forward to getting together with a lot of us on Saturday in Washington, Pennsylvania. For those of us
come out and see us,
just south of Pittsburgh, Western PA. We love that Western PA hunting and fishing lifestyle, and can't wait to see some of our friends out there. Go to conservative.org for the details and join us on September the 19th. That's this Saturday, Washington, PA, CPAC, Pennsylvania. Are you going to be there?
And get your shirts, America versus Socialism, the tour, get your bumper stickers, get your yard signs. This is the time to do it. Yes, I'm going to be there. I'm going to be so pumped to be there, and hopefully I get to see many of you.
Just a few moments ago, I hosted a historic call between Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel and King Hamad Al Khalifa of Bahrain. Both leaders expressed their condolences as well to the American people on this very, very tragic, horrible event that took place on September 11th. And they very much meant it. I want to thank them for that. There's no more powerful response to the hatred that spawned 9/11 than the agreement that we're about to tell you. You will hear something today that's, I think, very, very important for not only the Middle East, but for the world. In the spirit of peace and cooperation, both leaders also agreed that Bahrain will fully normalize its diplomatic relations with Israel. They will exchange embassies and ambassadors, begin direct flights between their countries, and launch cooperation initiatives across a broad range of sectors, including health, business, technology, education, security, and agriculture. This is a truly historic day. There had been 2 peace agreements with Israel in the last 72 years. This is now the 2nd peace agreement that we've announced in the last month, and I am very hopeful that there will be more to follow. I can tell you there's tremendous enthusiasm on behalf of other countries to also join, and we think ultimately you'll have most countries join, and you're going to have the Palestinians in a very good position. They want to come in. They're going to want to come in because all of their friends are in. But we have tremendous enthusiasm for coming into the deal. I want to thank the group of very talented people behind me, and you're going to be hearing from them in a second. But it's just a very historic day, a very important day, and so interesting that it's on 9/11.
We're now joined by Congressman Lee Zeldin from the great state of New York. Lee is a great conservative champion in the House of Representatives and really was exemplary in the pushback on impeachment. Congressman Zeldin, thanks for joining us.
Always great to be with you, Matt.
So there's a lot going on in the world. We're obviously right in the midst of a presidential campaign, and you're in the midst of a congressional campaign. But at the same time, the president is really hard at it at his day job. Some of these international achievements are quite amazing.
Yeah, world peace, maybe like twice in 30 days, and the prospects of additional wins to come. This is a big deal, this announcement that was made between the United States, Israel, and UAE. That full normalization of relations between those two nations, the diplomacy, the trade, the energy, technology, and so much more. If that was it, if that was all to this story, there'd be a lot to celebrate. And then just a few days later, you add now a new announcement that was made between the United States, Israel, and Bahrain, a full normalization of relations. Everything that I just discussed about the Israel and UAE, now applying to Israel and Bahrain. Other countries looking to be next. This is historic advancements in that region as these Arab Muslim nations all throughout the region get more concerned about Iranian aggression, start looking at Israel differently, and certainly the United States government, the Trump administration, the president himself, the priority that they've placed on strengthening Israel, strengthening the U.S.-Israel relationship, and letting these countries know how important this is to us is resulting in just so much positive progress and a lot to celebrate.
So when they normalize relations, I mean, people probably didn't realize the extent to which the Arab world just really had nothing to do with Israel. Is that right? Basically, no interaction. There was this talk about not allowing jets to fly over the airspace in Saudi Arabia. Obviously, trade. Was it that clear?
Yeah, such a huge deal. You mentioned the airspace, being able to travel over Saudi airspace can cut a 7-hour flight to 3.5. As the pandemic response has been going on in the Middle East, now you'll see Israel's terror group working with Apex National Investment in UAE on development of treatments and vaccines. If you go to a UAE hotel now, they're going to be offering kosher meals. So the granular detail and consequences of what's going on, the national security component, the technology, the economic positivity of this, and certainly the stability that it provides to the entire region, and for Israel most specifically, it's a total game changer.
Yeah, it is pretty amazing to think about even this idea of kosher meals. I mean, it's, I worry about is, I'm going to sound a little bit like those who were in President Trump's era about don't move the embassy to Jerusalem because, oh my God, the world's going to go on fire. Those people were clearly wrong. But am I wrong to be a little bit concerned that as these Arab countries take this much needed step in building this relationship with the state of Israel, that Iran and other terrorist factions are going to attack these countries, or do we have enough momentum where these countries have the security arrangements to not, be overwhelmingly worried about that?
So looking at this multidimensionally, at the same time as all this progress has been made that we just discussed, the United States was successful in taking out Qassam Soleimani, taking out Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi to eliminate the ISIS caliphate. To increase the economic pressure on Iran. The regime is weaker than it was. And the reality is, for every one rocket that Iran may look to fire at a United States interest, for example, we have the capability of delivering, tens, 100 times as much back at them with precision. Now, for us, we look at multiple instruments of national power. It's called the DIME principle, diplomacy, information, military, economics. The Obama administration would take the military option completely off the table, and that weakens the other instruments of national power. President Trump puts the military option on the table, not because he wants to use it, but because he doesn't want to use it. President Trump hasn't started one new conflict. You could go through a long list of conflicts that were started by prior administrations. President Trump has a different approach to it. But what we've seen is that diplomacy, economic pressure, the information operations, all more effective because the military options actually placed on the table. We have found that a lot of these foreign leaders, these regimes, they're more homicidal, not suicidal. And they know that the military option can lead to more devastation for them than what they can cause to others.
Joe Biden has been wrong about almost every major foreign policy conflict or decision that the country has had to face over his long career, but especially Obama and Biden during their 8 years, drawing lines in the sand they had no intention of enforcing, leading from behind, which I still don't really know what that means. It's such a shift in how Trump and Pence have approached foreign policy. It's strength, but it's not necessarily leading with armed conflict.
Yeah, and the Obama administration, and I mean, listen, Joe Biden opposed taking out Osama bin Laden. He opposed taking out Qasem Soleimani. I mean, he is just not fit for that commander-in-chief role for so many reasons, including what we're discussing right here. But what we saw during the Obama-Biden administration is that we were treating Israel like Iran and Iran like Israel. It was just nice to have a president come in to start treating our friends like our friends and our adversaries like our adversaries, understanding our adversaries do not respect weakness, they only respect strength. We can't be silent, not because we want war, but because we want to prevent it. And what we saw with like the negotiation of the Iran nuclear deal, or the pallets of cash showing up in the middle of the night as a ransom payment for American hostages to come back, or when detained Navy sailors were released and Secretary Kerry was simply just saying thank you and saying that that was a sign that the nuclear deal was working after they embarrassed our Navy sailors. On their way out the door, after the 2016 election, they got UN Security Council Resolution 2334 passed, 2334, and that was essentially seeking to ethnically cleanse Judea and Samaria and East Jerusalem of Jews. And where we would normally exercise our veto threat, we helped fast track it. Michael Flynn took a lot of heat for making these phone calls to get opposition to UN Security Council Resolution 2334. I would say thank you, General Flynn. Thank you for working the phones because this was an anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian resolution that was against U.S. foreign policy and against U.S. best interest. And here the incoming National Security Advisor is saying we can't afford to have you continue to destabilize our relations with friends over the course of your final weeks. I don't want to go back to that.
No way. And so this week we'll be signing a pretty historic agreement at the White House, right?
Yeah, tomorrow the president is going to be hosting an amazing, monumental, historic moment, a signing where leaders are coming from Israel. Bibi Netanyahu just landed in Washington, D.C. today. You'll have leaders there from Bahrain, from UAE, other countries represented as well. One of the most exciting elements of announcing this deal, between Israel and UAE and between Israel and Bahrain, is that you have other countries that want in. You have other nations seeing that all of the worst fears and threats of what would happen if an announcement like this was ever going to be made is just not true. They said that when President Trump moved the embassy in Israel to Jerusalem, that we were going to see this massive unrest and new war. When President Trump was recognizing Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights, they threatened the same thing. When President Trump was better leveraging the money that we're providing to the Palestinian Authority and cutting off certain aspects of foreign aid because the Palestinian Authority is inciting violence and financially rewarding terrorism, all the different threats that were being made as President Trump was looking to not only fulfill his own promises, but also the promises of presidents and presidential candidates in the past, none of it's coming to fruition. So maybe Oman's next. Maybe Morocco is going to have full normalization of relations. You could go down this list of these other nations. It's teed up for them to be next.
And the nice thing about it is Iran is continuing to be further isolated. And as you're saying, the pressure on the Iranian regime is having its effect. I know you're on relevant committees and you keep track of what's going on in Iran. From time to time, there seems to be hope that maybe the people of Iran can get separated from the mullahs who run the country. Do you have hope of that in our lifetime?
100%. You have millions of Iranians who, I mean, they preach a free, stable, democratic Iran. You have millions of Iranians talking about democracy in Iran. They want a better future for their country. The older generation, they remember what it was like before 1979. They want to go back to that. You have members of some of the earlier generations now, and latest generations, where lessons have been passed along from their elders. And millions of people want freedom and they want a better direction. And the fact is that Iran's economy is very much going in the wrong direction. The investment that this regime has put towards terror, their appeasing of hardliners, their lack of fairness and equality, where they have so much punishment directed towards women and other people, where whether it's Israel or United States and other countries. There truly is freedom and fairness. I believe that's all possible. Can you imagine if Joe Biden was elected and Susan Rice was the Secretary of State and they started tripping over each other, trying to get themselves back into the Iran nuclear deal, a nuclear deal where we're already hitting sunset provisions? What they would be begging to get into would actually be worse than the fatally flawed deal that President Trump fortunately got us out of. So this isn't just about stopping progress. This is about Americans knowing going into November 3rd's election that we are signing up for a foreign policy that is worse than just reverting to the Obama-Biden foreign policy. This is an Obama-Biden foreign policy where Joe Biden wouldn't even take out Osama bin Laden and Qasem Soleimani.
Yeah, it's amazing and irresponsible to think about the world having these madmen, these murderers, still amongst us, using the money in some of these cases that Obama and Biden sent to the regime in Iran, right? These unfrozen assets, as pallets of cash, to further these attacks on the state of Israel and on freedom-loving people everywhere.
Yeah, so they call Israel the little Satan. They call America the great Satan. They talk about wiping Israel off the map, illegally test-firing intercontinental ballistic missiles. Qasem Soleimani himself was responsible for several hundred U.S. service members losing their lives. Thousands of others very badly wounded. They overthrow foreign governments. We saw it in Yemen and supporting the Houthi rebels there. They are such a negative, destabilizing force beyond their nuclear bad activity. There's this other nefarious bad activity by this regime, and it's not even just the Middle Eastern continent. You could go much further to other continents. They've been in South America. And we saw it with the recent oil activity where they tried to get oil to Venezuela. There's a lot to be concerned about. And as we look at China, we look at North Korea, we look at the threats that face our country and our friends all around the world, I would be looking to seize on what is nothing but awesome momentum created by the Trump policies. I want to continue that. I don't want to go backwards. This is, making sure Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon is a huge deal. That might be the biggest deal. But you can't be so stupid in entering a deal like the Iran nuclear deal where you don't deal with any of these other bad activities. You give them up to $150 billion of cash to cut the deal, and then they start spending it not on education and infrastructure. Maybe they spent a very small amount of token money on that, but they're using it to be a bad nation, destabilizing the region around them. I want to build on the progress and not go backwards.
I agree with you, Congressman Zeldin. We have seen quite a course correction in how America has pursued its foreign policy interests under President Trump. And I don't want to go back to the idea that we have to bow and scrape, apologize for America, fund terrorists, allow Iran to feel like they're on the rise, make the state of Israel feel like they are the guilty party in almost every case, in every conflict. And the turnaround has been amazing. Now, you could have said there's a public policy discussion, but there's also this final discussion. Sometimes it's nice, and I think our founders knew this, to have somebody that comes from the outside of politics and even ascends to the highest office in the land, and they just Donald Trump just has a different approach. He is a man in a hurry who wants to get stuff done, and he doesn't want to do it the old ways.
Yeah. So you ever play Texas Hold'em, Matt?
Yes.
The best starting hand, pocket aces. The worst starting hand in Texas Hold'em is a 7-2 offsuit. What I noticed my first term, which was the last 2 years of President Obama, was as a negotiating strategy. The President of the United States, no matter how good or bad they are, inherits pocket aces. Because, I mean, that's the American exceptionalism built on the backs of generations of service members, diplomats, blood, sweat, tears. And what I saw was that the Obama administration would sit down with Iran, and we would be sitting down with pocket aces. Iran would be sitting down with a 7-2 offsuit. And President Obama's strategy and Joe Biden's strategy and John Kerry's strategy was, okay, you play our hand and we'll play yours. You don't have that right to just offer to switch hands that you inherited on the backs of service members from generations past. To your point, what we're seeing with Iran and these other countries in the region is that President Trump sits down with his pocket aces and he is winning his hands. He's winning his hands in dealing with progress with Israel, with UAE, Bahrain, and most importantly with Iran when Iran sits down with that 7-2 offsuit.
Yeah, I can't. That's a great analogy, Congressman. I love thinking about it that way, because I do think Joe Biden, Barack Obama, the rules of the game are kind of set, and they keep losing the hand. And that was terrible for us for 8 years. And because of that, freedom really suffered. And I do think that also Americans can lose their optimism about the future and the special role that America plays. And that's why we keep telling people that it's not just about Donald Trump on the ballot in November. It's about America itself. And we'll give in to its inevitable decline because we lurch left and embrace socialism with this, and socialism internationally means, really aligning ourselves with the wrong types of people and the wrong types of powers. And you're somebody in Congress who understands that. We love the fact that you're there. Keep up the fight. Have fun at the White House tomorrow. I hope it's not as raucous afterwards like it was the last time everyone was at the White House when the president had his acceptance speech, which was really a miserable post experience. There's a lot of bad people out there trying to do a lot of bad things, but you're one of the good ones. So thank you.
It's great to be on with you, Matt. Thank you. Thanks for what you do.
We're going to be right back with this great congressional candidate out in Colorado, Steve House, after this short video.
Surplus military equipment for law enforcement. They don't need that. The last thing you need is an up-armored Humvee coming into a neighborhood. It's like the military invading. They don't know anybody. They become the enemy. They're supposed to be protecting these people. So my generic point is
but
that...
do we agree that we can redirect some of the funding?
Yes, absolutely.
President Trump says that you want to defund the police. Do you?
No, I don't. By the way, he proposes cutting $500 million out of local police support. Look, what the police need is first of all, there has to be national standards that in fact apply to every police department in the country. And that's what we're going to do. I don't want to defund police departments. I think they need more help. They need more assistance. And we have to make it clear that this is about protecting neighborhoods, protecting people, everybody across the board. So the only guy that actually put in a bill to actually defund the police is Donald Trump.
We're now joined on CPAC Live by Steve House, a Republican candidate for the United States Congress from Colorado. Mr. House, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, sir. Glad to be here.
I guess I should call you Chairman House because I'm a chairman too. So that's a good title, right? And you did a great job running the state party out in Colorado.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that you never lose the chairman title, right? That always stays with you, I think.
I don't know. I try to tell my wife and my kids that they don't buy it. What's going on in the state of Colorado? We're reading that Colorado is turning more to the left with every election cycle, but yet you as a Republican, you're running for Congress. It must mean that you have hope that the people of Colorado are more in the middle than people think.
I think that's true. I mean, one of the things that's happening in Colorado right now that's kind of an underlying indicator is that there's a lot of Biden and Trump commercials running in the state right now. I don't think you run commercials if the state weren't close. We think it is. Additionally, in CD6, where I'm running, In 2019, we elected 4 Republican mayors in the district, and we now have a Republican mayor in every seat in the district, and that's never happened before. So this is a seat that's always been held by a Republican. Only Jason Crow winning in 18 was the first Democrat, but then we turned around in 19 and put more Republicans in office right where we are.
So Mr. Crow was an impeachment manager. How does that issue play politically in the district?
One of the best indicators of that is his name ID went from 59% to 76, but his favorable, unfavorable went to a favorable down to 31%. So most of the people in the district are moderate, about 50%. I don't think they cared for how that played out. I don't think they cared for his role in it. And quite frankly, he's not a real friendly guy in the district. So I think that's what's going to hurt him and why we're ultimately going to beat him.
So this mayor question that you brought up, all the local mayors flipping to Republican or all being Republican, that really is interesting to me. Was that because they just individually won their races, or was there a pushback on all the socialist changes that are going on around them?
I think it was a little bit of both. I mean, Mike Hoffman never won the city of Aurora as a congressman. He always lost the city and won the district elsewhere. He then goes and wins the Aurora mayor's race as he ran for it. And in the process, there were 2 other Republican candidates. Between the 3 of them, they got 62% of the vote. So that was a big indicator. I think the folks in Aurora and Arapahoe County and the moderate part of the district thought we went way too far to the left in 18. We've seen that in the way things are going. The city now is crushed by violence at times. So that was one factor. The city of Brighton, where I live, has not had a Republican mayor in many, many, many years. And we recalled a Democrat successfully for corruption and installed a Republican mayor there. So I just think people are looking for rational government, not irrational behavior like we had.
So it sounds like Colorado is starting a trend of turning back to kind of common sense, balance the books kind of republicanism in cities. Do you think that could be something that could hopefully happen in terribly dysfunctional places like Chicago and New York, which is just San Francisco, Los Angeles, so tragic to read about?
I know when you think about it, in New York, they have more available apartments than they've had in a long, long time because people are pushing away from those cities. I was in 8 churches yesterday morning, Matt, and the message that resonated the most with folks was liberal progressive cities, communist people do not allow thriving churches in productive progressive liberal cities. And so people are pushing back against that because their faith is being questioned. You know, what they believe in, they're being told is wrong. I think the American voter is going to move back in a direction they need to. And I think that'll include some of those cities.
Yeah, well, I hope that happens. You know, one of the things that many states are facing who have socialist, Democrat governors and local leadership is this whole question about opening up churches and schools. You say you were in 8 churches. Are churches allowed to operate in the state of Colorado?
Well, so Colorado in the last 2 weeks has not had a single COVID death. We also have the lowest infection rate. The governor just re-upped on 30 more days of emergency, protocols, which made people mad. I mean, there's a recall him process going on right now as well. I think that people are just going. I think some of them follow the rules, some of them don't. There's one church I was at that probably had 400, 500 people in a capacity of 1,000. They're really starting to push back and go back to church. Most of them are wearing masks, but I think people are less worried about it now and they're more interested in getting back to their normal way of life.
And this is true with schools too. I got 5 young kids, and the prospect of them all being home again was really debilitating to these kids. It really upsets them. And we've got most of our kids back in full-time school. What's the state in Colorado?
It's pretty hit or miss. I mean, some areas they do, some areas they don't. One of the things we recommended, and I wrote an op-ed for the Aurora papers about going back to school and what the data really says, but we said, look, at the very least, you ought to put all the elementary kids in school. If you have to, leave the online school and middle schools right now, put all the elementary kids in elementary schools and middle schools, because they're not really good in online and they're learning literacy, and literacy is the biggest problem we have in education. And then put the juniors and seniors in school because they're in transition phases. At the very least, you ought to think this through and do something more than just, blanket say online 2 days and school 3 days. Those things don't work and we're falling behind.
Well, if you get elected, and we certainly hope you do, and I would love to know if you feel optimistic about your chances, If you win your seat, but Republicans don't pick up the requisite number of seats to get back to majority, are you fearful that Nancy Pelosi, the squad, and the Democrats will just do the same thing to a reelected Donald Trump and pursue these kind of like faux impeachment strategies and stuff? I mean, do you think that's what you'll be entering?
Yes, I do. And I was in a sort of a street speech last night, Lincoln style, standing on a stump talking to a bunch of neighbors in a neighborhood. And I said, that's my greatest fear. Healthcare is our number one issue. Newt Gingrich has actually personally promised to help me if I get elected to implement our new healthcare plan. And he said, well, can you do that if Nancy Pelosi is Speaker of the House? The good news is the first couple steps in our healthcare plan require Alex Azar to make moves, not the Congress to make moves. And I think we can drive things like that through. I think local education issues are going to be about ideas and pushing people to understand that there's a better way, and then letting the public push the state governments in the right direction. But yeah, that would be kind of terrible if Nancy were Speaker and the president got impeached 3 more times.
What's the number one thing on the minds of voters in your district?
Beyond COVID and going back to school, it's the cost of health insurance. It's crazy. It's going up. We're looking at 12% increases for health insurance. I had an opportunity to meet with the former CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield the other day for lunch, and he just said, this is not sustainable. We got to fix it. And if we don't, we're going to really cripple America. So that's one of the top issues. And of course, we have people graduating from the biggest high school in the district with 16% of them being proficient in math, 25% in reading. And that's just not acceptable for our future.
Steve House, how can people help you in this important congressional race?
Obviously, they can support us financially by going to House for Colorado, HOUSCFOR, Colorado.com. We'll take volunteers if you're local. You can send out emails to your friends and let them know that we're a great candidate. We've got Jason Crow on the run. We're going to beat him. We don't even know if he'll debate us. He's worried about, I think, what would happen in a debate. But when you get the black pastors of Aurora to endorse you, which we've done, we've got Hispanic groups like the El Salvadorian Board. Those are very unusual endorsements because people are just not happy with this guy, and it's time for us to move forward.
It's time for a new house.
That's right, house in the house. House, if you want to protect your house.
That's awesome. Well, best of luck to you, and thanks for being with us on CPAC Live. We look forward to you coming out here and doing good by your people and collaborating with you even more.
Thank you very much. Tell Mercedes I said hello. We've connected in the past, and good luck to you and your family as well.
Thank you, sir. And thank you, everyone, for joining for another great episode of CPAC Live. How exciting is it that Zeldin's going to be in the White House for this Bahrain signing tomorrow? This is really history, folks. Even if you don't like Donald Trump, I don't know if there's a lot of people who watch the show who don't like Donald Trump, but even if you don't like Donald Trump, you have to take your hat to the fact that our president has made these things happen around the globe. Thanks, everybody, for joining. We'll talk to you again soon.